Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the Safe House Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co chair of the Safe House Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. We have a very exciting program for you today. Welcome to the conclusion of the Cyber Insurance series. Join me, as always, is my series co host, Tawana Johnson. Tawana, how are you today?
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Hey, tell you one thing, the summer went too fast for my liking.
Always does.
Yeah. Well, and the series was so much fun. I mean, you and the guests, it was fantastic. All the insights that we had and some of the surprises, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I do this every day, and I feel like I still learned a lot from talking with our guests.
Yeah. And so I guess really what we want to do today, Tawana, is to have you kind of walk us through the series and just kind of pull out the things that that you learned and also the things that to underscore people that are listening, things that they should pay attention to. That sound fair?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, if you'll recall, we started with the question of why there is such a low uptake for small to mid-sized businesses purchasing standalone
Yeah.
cyber policies.
Yeah.
Were talking to one of our colleagues who owns a small tech company, and his broker at their insurance renewal meeting said, "Oh, well, there's this cyber policy. You probably don't need it, but here it is." And when I heard that story, my jaw hit the floor.
Nice
And
sales job. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of sent us down the rabbit hole of why is this happening?
Yeah.
That was our starting point here. And our we kicked off the series by talking with Stephen Schwartz,
Hmm.
the Chief Insurance Officer at Safe Security, who talked to us about quantifying risk, and explaining, what you need to consider before looking at purchasing a standalone cyber policy.
Yeah.
Understanding your industry, understanding your revenue, employee count, geographic footprint. What data do you have?
Yeah.
Is there personal information? Is there PHI? And what is going to be the cost to the business if you can't access your data and you can't function for a week, 2 weeks, a month. So Stephen had some really good insight there into quantifying that cyber risk, that as the starting point when you're looking at a standalone cyber policy.
Yeah. And what the one thing I learned from him too is that the early days of cyber insurance was really built around the PII, the personal
Mhm.
information, right? And it's changed dramatically since.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously that is a big concern. The, personal information, personal health information,
Hmm.
all of that data is important, especially from my perspective. But there's so much more at risk for small to mid-sized businesses beyond just those legal and regulatory issues there.
Yeah. No, it was a fascinating conversation.
For sure. So then we talked to Ryan Mercer, the Vice President of Cyber and E&O at McGriff,
Hmm.
about the broker disconnect and why brokers are not pitching cyber insurance. He had some good thoughts on how to overcome that. And obviously, the first issue was lack of broker education and expertise. Brokers need to be educated on cyber insurance just like everybody else does.
Hmm.
And sometimes there are cost concerns. And Ryan did a really good job of explaining that, you can get a decent standalone cyber policy, that's relatively affordable for, in the event that you need it, it's going to pay for itself in the long run for sure.
Yeah, no, one thing I think that he did share with us, I didn't realize so many other services until I got into this a little deeper in the conversations over the last couple of years. The services, preemptive and restorative type of services that are available through a policy.
Absolutely. Those policies cover a lot more than you expect and anticipate. So much more than what you would expect under a traditional, property and casualty policy.
Yeah.
This is a full range of services and products that are covered in the event of an incident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and Ryan also talked to us about that application process as
Mm.
well, and how your broker can assist you in completing that application, and providing that proactive guidance to get a better coverage and policy for the business.
Yeah, and one thing that I think we have a bit of a conversation about is that by going through that process, it helps kind of shed light on where what controls need to be addressed within the organization. So operationally, they can refine, or at least have a roadmap that would help them address some of their weaknesses.
Absolutely, absolutely. If for nothing else, that's a good exercise to go through for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So then we talked about the underwriting process with Heather Monjo, the Vice
Mhm.
President and Director of Cyber Product Solutions at Allied World Insurance Company. And Heather talked to us about that underwriting process. When the application gets to the insurance company, what are they doing with it? What are they looking at? And we talked about the application itself. I
Mhm.
remember back in the day, being a whopping 5 years ago, that insurance applications were one page front and back.
Hmm.
Um, and we've talked about this before, that now some insurance carriers have their own threat intelligence teams. They'll try to do their own penetration testing. They'll get very detailed into what you put on that insurance application. And Heather was also very good about explaining that, the applications are not necessarily black and white, right? So
Mhm.
typically, my advice to my clients is you need to only answer the question that's being asked, right? But in this case, that's not necessarily the best approach, right?
Mm.
So if the application asks if you have multi-factor authentication and you have it for some applications, but not for all applications,
Mm.
the answer is not yes or no. It's yes and no, right? And
Mhm.
rely on that broker to help you to complete that application properly, so that the insurance company can better evaluate the risk there.
Yeah, and I think she made it clear too that if you do a much better job being very clear up front on the application, it helps on the claims later.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so after Heather, we talked about technical communications with Brandy Vargas. Actually, Brandy has gotten a promotion. Congratulations, Brandy. So she has a
Awesome.
new role at Crum and Forster. But
Well,
Brandy's,
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is that because she was on the Safe House?
I mean, who's to say?
I would say that it seemed to coincide pretty
It
closely.
does seem to coincide. So
Listen up,
congratulations to
listeners,
Brandy.
listen up. Listeners, listen up.
Right. So Brandy's role is kind of to bridge the gap between the technical aspects of your insurance policy, and to translate that into real world terms that insureds can understand, and to educate insureds on what is covered under the policy. And this is something that I learned a lot about here as well through the series, is that many insurers have free resources for their insureds, incident
Mhm.
response plan templates, tabletop exercises, expert consultations, security awareness training, a lot of the things that small to mid-sized businesses may not have because they assume it's cost prohibitive is now free because you've purchased this insurance policy. And I thought
And
that
her,
was fantastic.
yeah, and her
To
role is relatively new and very unique within the insurance space, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. She's kind of a, I don't want to say middleman, middle
Oh.
woman, but yeah, she has a very insured client facing focus, but she also has that technical expertise and knowledge to communicate that effectively. both before and during an incident.
So you're calling her a cyber whisperer?
Oh, she's a cyber ninja.
No, even better. All
Um,
right.
s- so then we talked to Tony Sukan, who is a claims examiner, about the cyber claim process. When an incident actually occurs, how is it handled from the insurance carrier side?
Uh-huh.
So Tony's role is to review the coverages under the policy and to help guide the businesses through an incident. An interesting thing from Tony's podcast is that she talked to us specifically from the perspective of a ransomware incident,
Yeah.
which I thought was very interesting. And
Yeah.
I agree 100% with her that we never want to pay a ransom. Paying a ransom is the last resort. We don't want to pay criminals. You can never guarantee that you're going to get what they say you're going to get. Can trust them as far as you can throw them. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Tony had a very interesting perspective looking at it from a ransomware incident
Yeah. And I
occurring
remember now
there.
because I had my new career all planned out to be the bagman, and you kind of now you're raining on my parade. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're a dream killer.
I'm the fun wrecker, as is what I've been told. So
I seriously doubt that.
So then we talked to my partner, Chris Wood, about data breach litigation and class actions following an incident. Chris also was very interesting. He explained how these class action litigations often get started. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, when you do have these data breach notification obligations following an incident, a lot of times state regulators also will require a report to the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
And some states, and I'm thinking particularly of Maine, will post that report on what they call, well, they don't call it, but what we call a quote unquote wall of shame. So
Oh.
they post every data breach report that they get. And then these plaintiffs' lawyers will troll that website looking for incidents that they may want to take up for a class action lawsuit.
Huh. Yeah.
Um, I think the interesting thing from that I heard from Chris, two things. Number one, these plaintiffs in class action lawsuits, they only need to show nominal damages. They don't have to have actual harm. They don't have to have actual identity theft. They could, just say, well, I have a risk of harm, or I incurred $20 when I, had to pay for credit monitoring or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it just that minimal amount of harm required to establish um, you know, damages from that perspective was shocking to me.
Well, and also the class size. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be
Yeah.
that many, right?
Right. The class size is definitely decreasing. And we talked about this with Chris a little bit. It used to be that you had to have anywhere from 3 to 500,000 people or more to certify a
Mm.
class. And we're
Mm.
definitely seeing much smaller classes, sometimes as low as 3,000 people to certify a class.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Then we talked with Jane Waring. She is an attorney at Zell Law, actually here in Atlanta with me,
Mm.
about business interruption litigation. So the interesting thing that came out of that conversation with Jane was that there's no black and white rule for
Mm.
how you calculate your business interruption losses.
Yeah.
And particularly because cyber claims are unique. It's not like, again, a typical property and casualty policy where, if there's a fire, your hotel is shut down for a year. With a cyber
Mhm.
claim, you can usually hobble along and manage to do some amount of work during the incident, and typically you are recovered and back up and running relatively quickly. Usually 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5, 6 weeks max.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
get back up and running. So and even during that time, you may have had some revenue. So it's Jane did a really nice job of explaining, what business interruption is intended to be, how it's calculated, and the documentation that a business should have and start collecting from the beginning when an incident occurs.
Yeah, because I get it was art versus science. It's kind of an art
Mhm.
kind of a thing to determine what makes a company whole.
Yeah.
Because that's the hard part, right?
Yeah. And again, there's not a lot of case law out there. So there's not a lot of guidance from the courts on
Mm,
how this
mm.
should be calculated, right? There's hundreds of years of case law on property and casualty, but there's just not been a lot of litigation for business interruption on cyber claims. So, it's, I don't want to say it's a stab in the dark, but it's like you said, it's a combination of art and science here.
Yeah, and most are settled outside of court, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Yep,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. And last but not least, we talked to Ted Brown about coverage litigation.
Hmm.
Ted also kind of explained that there's not a lot of litigation for coverage issues either. So sometimes there's disputes between what an insured thinks should be covered under the policy and what the insurance carrier thinks is covered under the
Yeah.
policy. And that's
Yeah.
where Ted steps in to kind of help figure that out. Um, and he did a really nice job of explaining that, again, why cyber claims are unique as compared to a traditional property and casualty claim. And just like you and I were just talking about, these cyber policies are pretty comprehensive in terms of what's covered. Um, and typically, these types of coverage disputes arise because someone doesn't understand what is covered under their policy, which takes
Yeah.
us back to Brandy's episode, right? Where her job is to really explain, what's covered and what resources are available. I thought those two tied in together very nicely.
Yeah, and when I look back at the series, what really struck me is how tightly woven and interconnected all the elements are. And
Absolutely.
yeah, because if you do a better job on the application, you probably have better claims. You and then have a reduction on litigation on the back end. I would, it just seemed to be kind of a fabric of sorts of interrelationships.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think that that's the clever part that you put together. Because when I was first, you started laying it out, the different guests, I was like, well, how does this come into play? And it all made a whole lot of sense when you finished up.
yeah, and I work with most of these guests all the time.
Yeah.
So I know, different pieces of the process. So this was actually really good for me to tie it all together as well, for my own knowledge.
Well, yeah, but I think you forgot one thing. I mean, our first episode in the series was you as a breach coach. No, seriously.
That's right.
No, as a breach coach, but you were the perfect tour guide for such a series.
Yeah, I like to think of my role as kind of a quarterback,
Yeah.
during the process. I'm kind of helping identify the appropriate vendors to help navigate an incident. I'm, communicating with the insurance carrier. I'm, you know, helping my client not to panic and think, okay, well, this is it. I got to hang up,
Yeah.
hang up the close sign. We're done here. Um, it, it's very interconnected. I have my hands in every pot, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Well, when you're in the trenches, as you have, and it showed, the chemistry you had with our guests was fantastic. And the conversations just really opened up a lot of people's eyes. I've gotten a lot of notes so far on the series.
Nice.
But it's for you to, from the trenches, now you get to step back and look at the whole thing. That has to be kind of fun to see
Yeah,
the
it is.
interrelationships. Yeah, from a different, you're not under fire. You're just saying, hey, I'm looking at this and saying, oh, I did learn some new things.
Yeah, and another thing that really struck me was that for all of our guests, there were definitely some recurring themes
Mm,
throughout that
yeah,
everybody talked about in one way or another.
yeah.
Um,
And
the the first of those being, you've got to know what data you have and where it is
Mm,
stored.
mm,
We talked about that for cyber risk quantification. We talked about
mhm,
that for, why it's important to help purchase the right coverage and
mm,
evaluating the risk. And for evaluating the risk of a class action lawsuit so that
mm,
well, I've got data on 5 million people here. If I have
mm.
an incident and a data breach, I'm going to get a class action lawsuit. So, knowing what data you have and where it is stored is important for pretty much every step in the process.
Yeah, it defines your obligations and your responsibilities, and the regulations that dictate you have certain care that you have to administer to that data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The second thing that came up frequently is the importance of having a good broker and how
Mm,
brokers are just a key part of this process.
yeah.
And obviously, we talked about how brokers need to be educated on cyber insurance as well. Um, but a good broker should be able to guide you through that application process. And we talked about how the application is that crucial point,
Mm,
from the underwriting perspective. It's crucial during the claim, it's crucial during your litigation. So it's important to get that application right, and having a good broker can help
mm,
facilitate that.
yeah.
The
Great.
broker can also help you with quantifying that risk
Mm,
and identifying what is the right coverage, and working with both the insured and the insurance company during and after an incident. Brokers are really important for every step in the process.
yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. So then we talked about the importance of timely notification of an incident to both your broker and your insurance company.
Yeah. I found
Um,
that interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So, so many times I'll get cases in where, the incident was discovered 6 weeks ago, and, our client went ahead and just hired their own vendors and got their recovery going. And now they want to know, like, well, is this going to be covered and what do I need to do next? And, you know, if you that's a huge risk. It may not be
Mm,
covered because there's no
mm,
guarantee that vendor that you selected is what we call a quote unquote panel
yeah.
vendor for your insurance carrier. Your
Mm,
insurance carrier has already vetted vendors that they
mm,
know and trust um, to assist their insureds through an incident. So, timely notification can definitely impact your coverage for sure.
mhm,
Let's see. And, the interesting thing again between Chris and Jane and Ted is that there's not a lot of case law on cyber claims, cyber
yeah.
data
Yeah.
breaches.
Yeah.
This is an emerging area of law, and that these claims are not necessarily black and white. It's still um, very very much in flux, and there are a lot of factors to be considered. So I think at this point, there's nobody's willing to take the risk to take a case all the way to trial.
Yeah.
At this point, it's just easier and not necessarily easier, but it gives you that sense of finality to negotiate outside of trial and reach a settlement, right? You know that you're getting a result that is the most favorable all around without the risk of what is a jury going to do.
Yeah. The uncertainty is not good for business.
No, for sure. And the last recurring theme, and I absolutely love this one because I say it all the time too.
Mm,
Um, Everybody across the board said some version of it's not a matter of if, but when. No
yeah.
organization is too small to be a target. If you're on the internet, you're a target. Everyone is a target. And I think every single guest said something
Hmm.
similar there. And I think that's probably one of the key takeaways here is that you're a target.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a crime of convenience, is what I learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
personal. It's just convenience.
Yep. Yep. So, those were the recurring themes throughout the episodes that really stood out to me.
Yeah, so those are reoccurring themes, Tawana. Great observation there. But do you have a list of the recommendations that all the experts had of the things that what's the one thing you can do to improve your cybersecurity posture today?
Absolutely. So, in terms of sort of bullet point action items from our expert guests, number one, know your data.
Mm,
Number two, have multi-factor authentication in
mm,
place.
mhm.
Many times that is going to be the root point of compromise if you don't have MFA enabled and enforced for every user on every application.
Yep. Yep.
The third thing is to make sure you've got good backups and that you're backing up frequently, right? So
Yes.
backups are important for restoration and recovery, and that is the number one thing that is going to determine whether or not you need to pay a ransom.
Yeah.
If you can get your data from a backup, you don't need to pay a ransom.
I like it.
And the last thing is to make sure that you have a good team in place before an incident and have
Mm,
an incident response plan ready um, when the incident occurs, not on your computer. An incident response plan is not going to do you any
mhm.
good if it's stored on your network.
It's compromised. Yeah.
Yes.
You can't
So I
get to
think
it. Yeah.
that's your bullet point list of action items right there.
Well, so in other words, as my guest today,
Mhm.
you have a truckload of number one things to do.
Yes, I do.
So our audience is going to be busy because of
Yes.
Tawana.
My number one piece of advice.
Oh, you are going to do the
Um,
number one. Okay. This is
My
Tawana's
number
recommendation.
one,
This is all the audience has to pay attention to today is Tawana's
yes.
recommendation. Yeah, I'll go shoot it.
All of our experts had wonderful things to say and gave wonderful advice. My number one piece of advice is have a cyber insurance policy.
Yeah, I think I think so too. You sold me. You sold me on it.
Call your broker.
Call your broker today. All right. Well, Tawana, I tell you what, the summer it flew by, and it was so much fun. Me with working with you and meeting all the people you've worked with in the trenches. I really appreciate it, and on behalf of the Safe House Initiative and all of us, the listeners, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the Safe House Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the Safe House Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.